three parts of karma, jnana and bhakti yoga represent the different stages in the realization of mukti. The mumukshu is caught in the causal chain of avidya and longs to go back or realize his absolute state. Karma yoga is the path of doing one's own duty, illumined by the knowledge of the distinction between eternal on the one hand and the empirical on the other. Jnana yoga is the path of self-realization wherein the self regains its own state. Bhakti yoga is the unitive way where the mumukshu sheds his egoism and yearns for the eternal communion with him. Karma yoga and jnana yoga, however, are only the means to mukti through the path of bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is the direct path to perfection as it leads to the very heart of religious consciousness. Each yoga is a stepping stone to the next level as it leads to the path of mukti or the progressive realization of Brahman. Though the ideal is one and the same, that is the attainment of mukti, the means employed to secure it is different. For Ramanuja, bhakti is the chief or primary means of attaining mukti. On the one hand, the Mimamsaka uphold the primacy of the moral law of dharma and claim that every Vedic proposition has a practical purpose and action is its main import. On the other hand, the Advaitin goes to the other extreme by saying that jnana is the only means to attain mukti. Jnana corresponds to the moral behavior while karma corresponds to the dynamic side of spiritual insight. The religious experience of Brahman is one more significance when compared to the things of Prakriti. When this meditation deepens into bhakti, then it becomes the direct pathway in realizing Brahman. The whole of Vedanta Sutra deals with the nature of Brahman and the means of attaining him. Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita as a systemic school of philosophy finds no difference between the absolute of philosophy and the God of religion and reconciles the claims of logic on the one hand with the needs of religious feelings on the other. It is to the supreme merit and credit of Vishishtadvaita of Ramanuja that the Brahman of the Upanishads, Vasudeva of the Gita, the Bhagavan of the Pancharatra and the Archa of the Alvars all refer to the same Supreme Self and at the same time also insists firmly on Bhakti Yoga as the direct means of realizing Brahman. The Vishishtadvaita of Ramanuja meets the demands of metaphysics and satisfies the supreme call of love by its theory of Bhakti Rupa Panna Jnana or Jnana which turns into Bhakti. The practice of Bhakti presupposes certain elaborate disciplines which have been already discussed earlier, so I don't want to touch upon those things. The aspirant enters the life of meditation and cultivates the love of God. It is by the absolute devotion to God and not by Vedic study, meritorious work or austerity that Brahman is realized. The knowledge of Brahman is neither academic nor speculative, but it is based on spiritual intuition which goes beyond grammatical and logical thinking. One who knows Brahman reaches the highest form of meditation which deepens into devotion or worship. Dhyana or meditation is the ceaseless remembrance of the Lord which in turn leads to bhakti or devotion. Bhakti is the meditation on Brahman touched with love or preeti. It is absolute devotion to Bhagavan as the life of our life and is love for love's sake. He is a true devotee who knows that Bhagavan alone is true and the ultimate truth of life. His life is immersed in true divine love. The Lord in turn sees him as his very life and self. The true jnani transforms himself into a bhakta who loves Bhagavan as his very life and even rejects mukti. For him, mukti is transformed into bhakti. The essentials of bhakti are thus constituted by the ideas of absoluteness, reciprocity and unconditionality. The supreme value of bhakti is the accessibility of the Lord to his bhakta and adaptability to his devotional needs. Brahman in Vishishtadvaita for Ramanuja becomes Bhagavan or the anthropomorphic highest. The true joy of bhakti is in the building up of the jiva of a sopana or ladder from the earth to Paramapada or the eternal board and the descent of Brahman from Paramapada to Shirabdi and from Shirabdi to the realm of immanence and incarnation. True love is beyond inequality of status and function. Ishvara on the one hand tries to shed his Ishwaratva to become one with Jiva, the beloved, while the Bhakta sheds his avidya and karma and communes with the Lord. Bhakti does not consider the barriers of distance and the fear arising from the sinfulness of sin contrasted with the holiness of the holy. Bhakti is for the sake of bhakti and has its fruition in absolute self-surrender to Bhagavan as the Upaya or the means and the Upeya or end. Even the Gita explains and extols the nature of Bhagavan as the Supreme Self and Bhakti Yoga as the most efficacious means of knowing Him and attaining Mukti. When meditation or Upasana as a divine command deepens into innate and intense love or Prema Bhakti, becomes its own and marked by fidelity and fervor and is called Paramekantya. Bhakti develops into Paramekantya Preeti or definitely determined love to Bhagavan as the Adhara, Niyanta and Seshi. There is no other truth or reality other than Bhagavan himself. The Bhakta realizes that Brahman is absolute bliss and renounces the pleasures and happiness related to his egoistic satisfaction. He also realizes the supreme truth that he is not him and that he is always his dasa. The will of Bhagavan as Niyanta is the will to love and ruled by love, and the will of the Sesha consists in its response to the divine call and attunement with the redeeming purpose by developing the attitude of service to God as the only motive of conduct and its sole end. Thus, the philosophic knowledge of Brahman and the Jiva has its fruition in the relation of Seshi and Sesha or Swamin and Dasa. Such Dasatva or service is a complete personal spiritual experience. The self does the service to the Lord not due to the attraction of his qualities but rather owing to its own real nature. The Bhakta recognizes Bhagavan as his only Lord and serves his will as such. Service is the only goal of religious experience and constitutes the highest joy of his life or rasa. It is the self which then primarily experiences ananda or bliss and not the body. All the joys of life belong not to the Jiva but to the Jiva Sharirin or the Supreme Self who lives within the Self. The Paramekantin thus lives, enjoys and thrives his being in Bhakti. Bhakti as service to God is completed or consummated only in the ideal of service to godly persons and to all Jivas and is the supreme end of Paramekantya. Thus when Bhakti Yoga becomes a mean to moksha, it is called Parabhakti. This Bhakti is a result of knowledge which is purified by karma and sanctified by jnana, and when it develops into a thirst for the direct intuition of Bhagavan, it is called Parajnana. Then the view of God becomes a vision of God, but it is still not perfect. Love leads to continuous and deep longing for God and unquenchable spiritual thirst. Then Parabhakti becomes Paramabhakti. The Bhakta at this stage eagerly and restlessly seeks the stability of eternal bliss. The Bhakta yearns to have the beautiful form of Bhagavan with the eye of the soul and hear the music of love with the spiritual ear. He does not wish or desire for the gifts from God but seeks the giver himself. When the Bhakta sees God, God also seeks him, and the lover and the beloved are finally united in the realm of Mukti. The Lord of love is always ever on the watch for the right moment to turn the Jiva from his carrier of sin and redeem him by becoming his Brahma Guru. The Mumukshu becomes blessed with Viveka and gets a clear and distinct knowledge of the Supreme Self. He renounces the pleasures of sense and sensibility and even the happiness of Swarga. Papa becomes the iron chain of karma binding the Jiva to samsara, and Punya becomes the golden chain leading to Swarga when Jiva serves the Devas and is finally hurled again back into this world. The Mumukshu rejects and renounces the values of both earthly and heavenly life, and thus discrimination is thus followed by remorse and dissociation from bodily feelings. He again tries to seek reunion with the Lord. Bhakti is not simply the act of pleasing God by external worship, but is essentially an inner spiritual attitude. When Bhakti deepens into Prema Bhakti or Ananya Bhakti or absolute devotion, it ceases to be an injunction and becomes a deep yearning for God. At this juncture, God is also seized with the soul hunger and yearns for communion with the Jiva. When spiritual faith in God ceases, soul hunger for God becomes irrepressible and the two are united together forever in love. I thank one and all for your patient hearings. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you all.